Hello everyone and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Adz. On the podcast today I have someone who's been a professional road cyclist in the 90s, which then developed into becoming part of what I can only describe as the extreme sports industry if you can overlay a label on what he does now. My guest also is one of a handful of people that started the scooter craze that has now exploded in the UK market. He owns two scooter brands, District Scooters and Dominator, and his company Greenover Sports is the sole distributor for Ryan Williams Nitro Circus signature scooters in the UK. Adding to this and his accolades, his company has been the linchpin for developing the new Dakine wetsuits, soon to hit the market. Man, I could go on. Plus the fact the guy absolutely rips on a surfboard and is a bit of a legend in my eyes. Please enjoy my conversation with Greenover Sports owner, Dan Maker. Dan Maker, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I'm all good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Been surfing today? Have you going today? You've been surfing this week?
Yes, and yes. Surfed. We've got a little break locally to us, which on a big sou'wester will get a wave. And then I was at Plymouth yesterday, and it was okay. I think you got it better the day before, but
it was
should have been here yesterday. That
yeah,
classic.
It was. I was a little bit dubious about it, to be honest with you, because I saw the forecast, and you know it's like looking at those forecasts and going up there. Sometimes it can be right, and other times it's just not correct at all. And got there just before it got light. It was still dark when I got there, and I was looking at it. I could just see a little bit of the, when you just see the silhouette of the white water breakers,
just the dark line.
Yeah, and it was still quite high on the tide, but yeah, we managed to paddle out just before it got light, and it was really good. Some of the best waves I've had there for a while, probably a couple of years. Probably.
Yeah, I haven't surfed there very much, and I'm still a bit kind of mixed on how good it can be. You can get glimpses of it. The odd wave every now will come in. You'll be like, wow, that was cool. That was properly long and kept going. And other times you can flounder around and paddle around in circles and come away a bit disappointed. But yeah, it was good.
I think you can get on on YouTube and watch some of the videos of it and get a little bit lost in translation with it sometimes. I'm a little bit like that with anywhere I go. I know how good it has been and how good I've surfed it before. You want it to be like that, especially when you see there's a 15-foot swell wrapping up on the north coast, because it's a north facing break. You always expect it to be super good, but it's one of those, isn't it?
I think I sort of started surfing when I was about 15, younger than that, 14, probably 15. And I always remember it being way better than it is now. I don't know why. I wasn't a particularly good surfer and still not that good either, really. But I always remember it being epically good at like Bantham and Lanarcombe, where it's never been good ever. You always come out going, oh, that was so awesome. You're like, no, it wasn't. Not really. It was junk.
Sounds like a fisherman's tale, doesn't
it? Yeah,
the
probably
fish
is
always bigger when
like
you
caught
caught
it. Wife.
Yeah,
and it was like, I always remember. Was it the older I get, the better I was, or something like that?
Oh, don't go down the old guy rules, Matt. That's a
well, we're going
route.
to that early.
It's a shameless route.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. But no, I'm just trying to do as much as I can really. Get in as many times as I can. Not easy, trying to balance work commitments, and it's not something you can switch on. It's not like mountain biking where you can go to a trail centre and you can go anytime and its trail centre is going to be the same. You're trying to balance it between swell windows and stuff. So the diary can sometimes get thrown out the window. I'm like, no, out.
I think work have just taken it as a given now. Where's Adz? He's not here.
Check the swell forecast.
Yeah, he's probably down the beach.
I'm like, I didn't even tell my guys know where I'm going. I'm like, I'll make up some shit about a delivery. I'll be like, yeah, I've got to go to Cornwall and do a board delivery. It's like, right.
Yeah, you say it in that sarcastic manner as well. Yeah, I'm just going to deliver something.
That's it. I won't be long.
Yeah,
then I'll see you tomorrow. Later. Yeah, that's right. Where did that go? Yeah, no, I'll never come back in. But that's good.
Mate, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, this is always a bit weird, isn't it? Talking about yourself. I'm never particularly.
Well, start from the beginning then. So, where you grew up, how you got into sort of the outdoor pursuit model, I would say.
Yeah. No, that's an easy one. So, South Coast, basically, grew up on a farm that's been in the family for a couple of generations. And so as kids, we just lived outdoors. That was the part of the house was fucking freezing. So it was warmer outside on most days. And so we just hung out outside. I was digging holes and building dens. And we're really lucky that the farm is right on the coast. So we have like a little beach and everything down there. So we grew up fishing and swimming and sailing and all that other junk. And yeah, that was it really. So for me, I've always been outdoors, just always been outdoors. Had no clue other than I didn't want to get into farming pretty much because that's quite a tough industry, particularly on a small farm. It wasn't a big farm. So, but Dad was pretty good at getting us out of bed, either by starting a chainsaw outside the window or whatever. So it was a small working farm. He had a different business that actually we lived off. And the farm, I think he was probably more obliged to take on. He's a farmer. He's definitely a farmer. He took it over from his dad. And that wasn't something that we were going to do. I've got 2 brothers, by the way, younger. None of us were going to do that. And I just kind of wanted to forge my own path, really, not that direction. And in the absence of really knowing what I wanted to do, I'm quite envious of somebody that wakes up when they're 16 and go, I want to be a vet or I want to be a doctor, because there's a path laid out for you, which you can follow. And you may become a vet or not, but at least you've kind of got a bit of direction. I didn't have any, other than the fact that I knew there were things I didn't want to do. So by kind of not doing that, I did loads of other stuff. So it sort of started there. So I obviously was on the water or in the water. I skateboarded from about 11. That naturally progressed into surfing. I didn't really jump on the windsurfing thing, which could have been an angle for me back then. A couple of my mates did, but I was like, it's too much faff. And I sailed dinghies from a pretty young age till about 15, 16. And then skateboarding was way cooler. Surfing was even more cooler. And then I got a car at 17, passed my test pretty much straight away because I've been driving since I was 10 on the farm, and I was gone. I was like, I was out of here. And that's it. So that kind of like, and then I've sort of done work based around that really. Kind of did my A-levels, didn't complete them because my mum started getting bad grades on the homework that she was doing for me because I couldn't really do it. So we had to leave that. I say we because I was so disappointed that she wasn't good enough at my RE homework. But anyway, apart from that. And then went into, you remember the old days, the old YTS schemes?
Yes.
Back in the day. Which I did that as a marine engineer, basically, locally for a local guy. So, yeah, did that for a couple of years. Got fed up of not earning any money and working 50-hour weeks. And fortunately, like I say, my dad had a different business to the farm. So, and that was in decorating with sort of specialist paints and stuff. God, it's super boring, isn't it? Wow. Anyway, I did that for a bit until I was about 19 and kind of worked out that I could either have my dad as a dad or a boss, and he was a much better dad than he was a boss. And so we parted ways, and what did I do then? I started cycling, I think, actually. I'd been into mountain biking for a bit at this point. I was one of the first guys to get a mountain bike in our area, and kind of loved it. Oh no, that's right. We'd planned, me and a mate had planned to do a trip to Morocco, that kind of classic coming of age trip. And we'd saved up a bunch of money. I'd quit my job, bought a transit van that I converted into a camper. You know, this is all super massive cliches, but it is what we did back then.
Mate, it's brilliant though.
It is what we did. And right at the last minute, he pulled out, and I was like, bollocks, what am I going to do now? Because I didn't really want to go on my own. Wasn't that brave. And just at that time, I was living in Brixham, and there was a new mountain bike shop that had just opened up called Imaginative Brixham Mountain Bikes. And so I went in there and basically spunked all the money I'd saved to go to Morocco on a brand new mountain bike. And then Andy, he's called one of my best mates now. He encouraged me to come out because they did like evening rides and everything, and which I did and could keep up, which was also a bit unusual. And they try and put you through the ringer, and I would always be able to kind of keep up. And I didn't really know why. I wasn't particularly good at riding, but I think through all of the surfing and skateboarding, all that kind of stuff, you have a relatively strong constitution, and you're obviously quite fit because I was surfing a lot, and I could keep up easy. And then they were like, "Oh, you should do a race." And actually, randomly, my first mountain bike race was at Woodbury Common, and did the sport category and got my ass handed to me, which is like normally what happens when you first do a race. But I was hooked, and that was it. I just wanted to ride bikes, and that set me on a path to eventually living in France and racing for a living, not pro, but if I didn't do well, I didn't get paid type thing. And that was best and worst times of my life, actually, probably doing that. There were some dark times in that. And that took me all the way until about 27, I guess. And I think I just had tired legs by then. And I liked cake, and I liked to eat cake, and you couldn't really do that type of stuff. You know, it was pretty religious. No drinking, no smoking, no like religiously taking your heart rate every morning. You know, it was pretty disciplined. I don't need to talk to you about discipline, but yeah, it was tough. And it was in that kind of early 90s when drugs were, and this is not a conversation about that, but there would be people taking amphetamines and stuff next to you in a race before they started. And it got pretty leery at some points, and I wasn't really prepared to do that. And also I probably wasn't good enough to go all the way, if I'm really honest with myself. So I didn't really want to make that ultimate sacrifice to it. And so I stopped, and I literally just stopped, and didn't pick a bike up again for about 5 years. That was it. So yeah. And then I did pick it up 5 years later, and now I ride quite a bit, and my business is around bikes. And when I kind of left the sport, we organised training camps. We did loads in the sport, and to this day still do the odd training camp.
When you say we, who's we?
Basically, I say we because I'm embarrassed about talking about myself, but mostly it's me. I mean, obviously, you know, no man is an island. Type thing. So there were always people around me that helped, or that I would get in to help. But ultimately, it's again in this kind of pursuit of not really knowing what I wanted to do. I just do loads of stuff, loads of cool stuff, until it wasn't cool, and then I'd stop. You know, type of thing. Drove my wife crazy, probably with it. I still don't really know what the plan is.
Do you feel like that trip that you would have took to your mate in Morocco?
Oh, could have been.
So
totally could have been a crossroads.
Yeah. So do you reckon if you'd have actually gone, do you know what? I'm actually going to travel to Morocco on my own and see what comes out of that trip, it would have been a completely different turn of events to what you actually did?
100%. Yeah. I think walking into that mountain bike shop and buying a new mountain bike, because ultimate retail therapy basically, and meeting Andy probably was a pretty decisive moment, because I'd met my wife Lucy. I'd met her already by now. We'd been together since we were 16, 17, but she'd never prevented me from doing anything that I wanted to do, and I didn't know, so she didn't guide me. She had her own path when we were that age, or her own path. And so I think, yeah, meeting him was probably quite influential on that full direction, and it could have gone in a completely different way. I mean, I've been to Morocco since. It's a proper shithole, so I probably wouldn't have made it back. Could have got ugly.
Well, it's a shithole now, but like back then,
I suppose I don't know back then. I never went.
But I spoke to Jed Stone. Do you remember Jed Stone? So he was European British surf champ, back in like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
surfed all the way up, competed up to like when he was 60.
Yeah,
and he was telling a few stories about, you know, he did the same as you, the cliche, and back in the day, back in the 70s, got a camper van, converted it, travelled down with his missus down to Morocco, and he did a couple of trips on his own and just kind of like stayed there. And he said there was probably like 3 other people in this.
It must have been amazing, actually.
Massive area, yeah. I mean, those are the sort of things that when you read like Surfer's Path or something like that, or a book about the 70s, that you kind of go, man, that must have been cool. Even in the 90s, even.
Early 90s, I was just fully committed to cycling, so I didn't do anything. I stopped surfing at that point. In fact, I didn't surf for about 15 years, and because the whole time that I was cycling, there was no room for anything else, basically. And Luce, she wasn't keen. She would never have wanted to go down. She might go now, but back then she was training to be a chef and stuff, so I couldn't have gone with her. But I knew early on, that I wasn't prepared to sacrifice that relationship for it. I didn't love it that much. And even through the whole cycling where I was living abroad, we would be commuting backwards and forwards, and she's pretty much been I'm not going to say ball and chain, but the anchor is probably a politer way of saying it. It's something that I've always come back to. And she's given me the freedom to do that. So yeah, I've got probably a lot to thank for that.
I think if you look at a lot of people that were or are professional sportsmen, those people that don't have those anchors, that are kind of like what you say, didn't really know what they're doing, they're just kind of like going along and winging it. If they don't have that grounding, that's when people start coming unstuck a little bit, I think. Yeah,
can do, for sure. And I think not the reason, it was an accumulation of reasons why I stopped. Injury, tiredness, exhaustion, politics. But one of the ones was, I was looking at guys in their 50s and 60s who had done this journey, and I was like, they were divorcees, or they were drug addicts, or they were dead. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I want that. Like, it's not worth that. And so I didn't, there was all of those reasons were reasons why I went off and did something differently. And actually I stopped enjoying it. Like, you need to do it a lot. We were riding between 350 and 500 miles a week, 12,000 miles a year, 100 plus races a year. You have to enjoy that, because that's pretty tough. And
what discipline did you do? Did you do multiple disciplines, or were you specifically downhill? Or
no, I started mountain biking, and back then mountain biking was flourishing, so it wasn't an established scene like it is now, and it's never really become like road cycling. It was almost impossible to make any money at it, particularly make a living, and I switched onto the road for training to be better at mountain biking, and kind of won the Southwest Series, won the Cornwall Series, racing the Nationals, racing the Grundig World Cup when it was at Plymouth, did all those type of things, mountain biking. But there wasn't really any path here to go. That's why there have been a few top mountain bikers, but from the UK, but it's pretty tough. You have to move away to do it, really. Whereas on the road, there are so many races and there's so many levels that it was easier to make a living. Crikey, yeah, I can't remember the year it was, but we did I was racing for Mid Devon Cycling at the time, and Totnes was veered with a town in France called Via in Normandy, and there was this like twinning race that they would do. They would come over here and we would go over there, type thing. And one September we went over there, and we went over with a guy called Jeremy Hunt, who turned pro for Benesto and has been a pro for years and raced on the tour and everything. Super good rider. He was local guy, lived in Totnes, and we used to train with him all the time. He was another level to where we were, and we went over, and this was my first ever real road race, and it was a 2-day stage race, so it was 3 stages over 2 days, and the first stage was 80 miles. I'd never even ridden 80 miles in my entire life, you know, and so you get thrown straight into the deep end. Shaved my legs, I was looking pretty cool, and sort of did okay, and was mentored by a guy called Colin Lewis, and who's obviously pretty done the tour in the Paris-Roubaix, pretty famous cyclist locally, and his words were, just stay in the front and do no work. And I'm like, I have no fucking idea what that means, you know, type thing. And there were 120 guys, and we all on the start line, and off we go. And it's a different level to racing here. And I didn't quite make it all the way in the group on the first stage. We got dropped with about sort of 5 miles to go in the finishing circuit. The only good thing is that I was with 3 other people, and the 2 behind me, they'd already been dropped, so I'd done better than them. But Jez went on to win the bloody stage, so we had the yellow jersey, and so then our job was to defend the yellow jersey, and this is all so new and so exciting. It was amazing. And then we went into the second day, and it was like a shorter road circuit, 4 big laps, about 45 mile or something, not very far, and we were sat on the front, you know, like you see in the tour. We were doing that job. We were pacing, we were bringing back the brakes and all this kind of stuff. It was awesome, you know. Didn't know what the hell I was doing, but felt pretty good. And then the final stage, it was a finishing circuit. It looked like a criterium, so it's a really short circuit and 60 or 70 laps up a big hill every single time. I think I got blown out like a quarter of the way in, and then Jez won it again. Bastard. So we ended up winning the overall with him, but he did it on his own. He was so much better than everybody. It was amazing. And anyway, since that, I was like, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And wrote a letter to the president of the club, Velo Club de Bocage in Villa, and I said, is it all right if I come back next year and race for your team in Normandy? And that was what I did. And he said, yeah, and I did. And I rocked up in a Fiat Panda with everything I owned and my bike. Couldn't really speak a word of French, so everything I'd learned was out of a phrase book. So I could only talk in phrases, really. And turned up at 11 o'clock at night after catching the ferry, walked into a bar, which we like pre-arranged. And I did all of my communication through an 11-year-old boy called Pierre Alain, and went up to the bar, ordered a hot chocolate, and waited there for like 15 minutes thinking, what the fuck have I done? What is going on here? You know, type thing. And yeah, loved it. I mean, loved all that. It was good. Then got in my first race. I trained like a bastard all winter. Got into my first race. It was April, and came second. And should have won, possibly, could have won. Didn't, messed up the sprint a little bit, or I was in a break, and one guy clipped off, and I was with 2 other people, and those 3 didn't chase, and I didn't want to lead it out because, you know, the guy that won it played good tactics, and so I beat the other 2 guys in the sprint, and ever since then I was in the paper and being recognised. And I mean, we're talking, you know, not even a very big fish in a really tiny, not even a pond, more like a puddle. And but it was felt pretty good.
Yeah,
felt pretty good.
Of course it would. You're getting all that recognition, and you're doing well, and you're doing something that you enjoy. I mean, that's surely what we all kind of
almost
want to do.
Continually buzzing.
Yeah.
And
were you getting sponsored? And
yeah, we were. Yeah, how it works. So we had like you get over there. You get paid at the end of the year. And the prize money is really big there. I mean, big relative. This is when it was francs. This is pre-Euro days. And
this is still mountain biking, is it?
No, this is road. This is all road cycling now. Yeah,
I thought so. I was like that.
Yeah, there was no mountain biking really like that. But you could race every day. That's how many races there were. As opposed to mountain biking, you'd be hardly ever racing. And I was like, I wanted to race. Like that was what made me go well. And so we would get paid based on our position that we finished. So if we finished well, we would get paid pretty much straight away, but you didn't get paid until the end of the year. So you had to go over there with some savings in order to get you through the year, to get you through the season. And then there'd be a big kind of like dinner at the end, and then you would pick up your prize check. And so you were check and balancing, you know, like, shall I buy meat for dinner or shall I just buy vegetables? Because you had to balance that amount of money because you were on a shoestring the whole time. And then at the end of the year, you get paid, you know, not thousands of pounds. Let's not get too excited, but you'd get a few £1,000 and it would kind of, if you'd done all right, it would cover the season, give you a little bit towards next season. And then you'd come home, do shit jobs, gutting fish and, you know, the little silicone packets that you put in shoe boxes, do that for 12-hour shifts just to earn enough money. Do that overnight, so then you could train in the day. Yeah, they were easy times, really easy, because you had a calendar and you knew what you were doing every day. You had a training program, and so you would wake up and you knew that day you would be doing 50 mile or 80 mile, or you'd be doing intervals, or you'd be racing. You know, it was clear until it isn't, and then you're like, wow, lost for ages. And I think that's when you see sports guys, you know, and I wasn't a pro, you know, I earned a living, but that was about as glamorous as I could make it. And there were some cool things that we did on that. You know, you got good invites and you did interviews on the radio in French. So I probably said your mum looks like a helicopter or something. I don't know. And all that was cool. We did a big race called the Tour de Normandy, which is a 10-day stage race, probably the biggest race I did in my career. And one of the defining memories is in a long line of like 100 and some odd riders lined out doing 40 mile an hour, absolutely on the rivet, and a low hanging TV helicopter filming you. And, so that, you know, that was kind of like cool. I get why people do it. I mean, it's a massive buzz. And then you get dropped. It's like race over, or you're in a massive crash, or it can be, as I say, best and worst, pretty much. So yeah, I think it's they were good times for sure, and learned a lot about myself. But you definitely, when you realise that you're not going to get there, there's more help now for it. Back then, you're on your own. You just got to man up, get on with it.
That was like with any sport back then, though, wasn't it? Really,
totally.
Unless you were like the pinnacle of the game or the sport that you were in, and you were far better than everybody else. Then,
and there weren't many of them.
Yeah, and then you know you pretty much, like you say, just kind of funding yourself with whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
and then if you're one of these people that isn't both feet in, you've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and you're undecided. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, you need a lot of support, and there's so much more support now for people. And this is not kind of like, oh, back in our day. But back in our day, it was different. It was just different. It wasn't as commercial. It wasn't as recognised. You know, we didn't have Bradley Wiggins, or Chris Boardman was probably the first one. Well, after guys like Tommy Simpson and Colin and those guys back in the 60s, and then there was nothing really. There was nothing. You just had to do it on your own. And our kind of training regime, there was a selection for sure, and you'd go out with Mid Devon training run on a 120 mile club run on a Sunday morning, and we'd have young guys like first time out. They would get left 40, 50 mile from home. Just to fend for yourself. You know, you're like, if you're 16, I mean, I was right. I mean, I would go back with them and go like, you know, have you got any money? Can you phone your dad? If from a phone box, no mobile phones or anything back then. Have you got enough food? Because they'd eaten all the fluff in their pocket at this stage. You know, they were screwed. in the middle of Dartmoor in driving rain. I mean, it was pretty brutal. But if you got through that, then you were kind of going to be okay. If you weren't going to get through that, you don't deserve to be there.
Yeah, there's a lot
That's
more.
a harsh thing to say, but
No,
that's it.
that's the reality of it, though, isn't it?
A bit.
And but now these days we've got a lot more designated programs. I think sports science and the way that we look at a sports person anatomically, nutritionally, and the way that we actually build up a training program to bring people on is a lot better. Now, don't get me wrong. My personal opinion is that in this country, we don't pump as much money into it. Now, I just think economically, as a country, we don't have that. We've got so many different things we need to look at as well as sport. Whereas, like, you know, Americans have got these massive corporate organizations that actually fund all of these programs, whether it's American cycling, American football, you know, whatever, surfing even.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a national team that they have funded coaches that teach the kids that are 8 years old all the way up to, you know, when they're pros. And they like groom them. Aussies, exactly the same. They groom them through rugby league, surfing, all of their sort of like their core sports.
You're so right. And I know, you know, when we were, you know, we had British cycling, which was not great back then. And we had no science. I mean, Chris Baldwin was probably the first trailblazer that came on and was, you know, using a heart rate monitor and was talking about levels. And even back then, we didn't really know, what's your maximum heart rate? 220 less 20, you know, no, 220 less your age. I mean, that's not scientific at all.
If you asked me that back in the 90s when I was playing rugby, I'd be like, I have no idea
what you're talking about. Heart rate?
What crack
I think I've got a heart.
Yeah.
That's it.
And where is it?
I don't know.
It's
somewhere.
The cartoon says it's on the left-hand side somewhere.
It's in your armpit.
Yeah.
No, it is, and now it's, and the level is certainly better, broader and better. But it's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? I mean, what comes first? Do the athletes come first, or the desire and the ability and the winning medals comes first, or does the money come first in order to develop the athletes? And I think if you look at the very successful sports in the UK recently, I mean, cycling is one of those, particularly at an Olympic level. That's a lot to do with funding, but also good people, good coaches, you know, and they've come from being successful athletes. So some of them, and more science. I mean, more of everything. It's definitely way, 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 way more sophisticated than, I mean, it would be ridiculous, you know, what we would do in order to think that we were going better. We had no clue. And then half the time was you were just completely fatigued, almost exclusively you were tired. I got gastroenteritis back in April in my last year over there. And I didn't know what I was doing. And you just puked, shat, ate, raced, you know, that was like it. And that led to stomach complications later on that year, which, you know, you just run out of energy completely. And I was suffering with chronic fatigue for sure, diagnosed with it, in fact. And that was when I kind of looked at myself and got a coach, looked at a nutritional program, looked at a proper training program, and was for sure the best I'd ever been in my life. In the last year that I did it. And unfortunately for me then, the enjoyment kind of lost it for me a bit. But for sure I was at the fittest that I'd ever been. And that was because of those things. Because of somebody who knew what they were doing, telling you what you should be doing.
It's amazing how much just having a little bit of knowledge about your energy inputs, outputs, what you're eating, you know, your glucose levels can affect your performance, even your water intake.
Yeah.
Even something that basic back then, because, you know, I can remember, you know, I played a decent level of rugby.
Yeah.
My nutrition levels were shocking.
You wouldn't even know what the word meant.
Yeah. Like, you know, for me, I didn't really train weights that much. I just played the sport. I enjoyed what I was doing, but I did lots of different things that really, if I looked at it now, helped me out. But I enjoyed those as well. So I did like athletics. You know,
lots of complementary.
Yeah, I did sailing. You know, I was windsurfing. I was surfing.
Yeah.
My life, without kind of like contradicting what you're saying, pretty much up to the point where you're 20, where you went your direction, I joined the military.
Yeah,
sounds like it. We did the same things.
Yeah.
But my point being is that if I'd have known more about nutrition, apart from like thinking a T-bone steak with some chips and, you know,
chicken and rice
on the side, and it's pretty much like all I ate.
Yeah.
Maybe if I ate a little bit better, maybe my performance levels would have been better. But at the end of the day, if you enjoy what you're doing, then, you know, and you didn't know about it then you can't really argue with that.
No, and I was given some advice really early on when we started looking at kind of, you know, what we were eating and heart rate levels and all this kind of stuff. And in fact, it was Colin that gave it to me. And he said, look, he said, when you turn pro, you have to learn to eat chips. And the meaning in that really was basically like, you can do all this nutritional stuff now. You can do all the energy drinks. You can do all the proper stuff. But when you turn pro, you'll just eat anything because you're so freaking exhausted. And sure enough, when I got there, you have to eat you just eat anything because you can't be as disciplined, you know, because you might be in a team that doesn't sign up to that stuff, or you get alienated for coming in. And you know, there are athletes like Robert Miller and you know, they would be a vegetarian and that would be completely against your director sportifs type way that you would be doing it, because you're clashing into the old school essentially. And yeah, I mean, I for sure think that you would be better, but everyone would be better. Kind of does level the playing field a little bit. And it still comes down to basically desire. And then some guys cheat and some guys don't. Some guys look at what they're eating, some guys don't. Some guys look at their training methods, some guys don't. You know, the guys with the natural ability or the guy with the biggest desire is probably still going to win.
Or the biggest pack of drugs that they're pumping into them.
Possibly.
Because, you know, you were talking about at the beginning.
There probably was a little bit of that, yeah. But all that we used to joke about this with guys when we were out training, and it'd be like the guys who are good, naturally talented before drugs, they would win. And then the guys who are a bit shit would take drugs in order to beat the guys who are naturally good. And then the guys who are naturally good take drugs. You still get the same natural of order. You know, it's still the guys with the most talent are going to win pretty much on the day. I mean, that's a very broad generalization. It's very clever now.
No, you've tarnished everybody with that now.
I have pretty much, because back then basically everyone was doing it. No, that's another broad generalization. But to be honest, it doesn't matter if you are or not. You can't, like, I don't train ever now. I can't do a course of EPO and win the tour, right? You still have to sacrifice so much. You have to train so hard. You have to be so disciplined. You have to, with your weight and what you eat and everything, that it almost kind of like, it's irrelevant what they do in order to get that 2 or 3% extra.
Marginal gains.
Very marginal. But the work that they've even got to do to get there is phenomenal. And that will crack the majority of people. So, you know, were those big famous guys cheating? Did they get an unfair advantage? Probably not. They were just the best riders still.
So you got to, 26, and you decided that you'd had enough?
Yeah, 26, 27, got married. I think it was about then. That's a test. Probably failed. Then got offered a job by a friend of mine that was being promoted. And he said, look, he was a sales manager for the Southwest region for Buddy Fox. And he said to me, he said, I've got a promotion. I need to find somebody to fill my job. Do you want it? And I was like, what, wait a minute, get paid? Because I hadn't really been paid a regular wage for years up until this point. Get a car, get a mobile phone. Well, mobile as in it's still attached to the car, but that was pretty swanky. And get paid to visit bike shops. I'm all in. And so I worked there for a couple of years, and that was good. Learned a hell of a lot, and probably the start of my sort of business grounding, I guess, business kind of education started there. Again, and I used to just put what I'd learned from racing into work. You know, if you want to go and get the order, you need to go and do the time. You need to get in the car. You need to get up early. You need to be disciplined. You need to be reliable. You need to deliver on what you said. You know, all those things, which is everything that we just dragged over from being in sport. There's lots of very close synergies between sport and business, I think. And have a plan, have a calendar, call plans, you know, regularly do them. Wasn't taking my heart rate, and I was eating cake at this point. So that was cool. But the fundamentals are the same. And yeah, that's kind of led to all different things and meeting different people. And actually, again, like in a race, if there's a break that goes up the road or somebody attacks, you have to look at it and go, I think that's an opportunity. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for that. That's the one, you know, that's the break. Because loads of times you would sit there and go, oh, I've just had a massive effort over a hill. I'm not going to go now. It's not going to stay away. And it bloody stays away. And just like with business, opportunities will come and there'll be like an attack going down the road and you'll be like, shit, I should be in that. And so I was kind of okay at recognizing them. And did a couple of different things for a few different people. And what the biggest one probably for me was we had got to the point of working for Muddy, left Muddy, set up my own business doing a bike distribution, importing bikes from Holland, really tough. But this was my own business now. And
this is Greenover, isn't it?
No, this was pre-Greenover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was... way back. Greenover was not until the kind of 2000s, really, late 2000s. But during that opportunity, came across these little, remember the old micro scooters, the folding scooters back then. And we had a couple of guys on the road and we were visiting bike shops every day. And I came across this opportunity or got introduced to these guys and they were just starting. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, this thing is cool. Because I still had that kind of like, you know, cool shit excites me, you know. And they were cool back then. Before there were toys, they were super cool. And I remember with my old Ford Mondeo, I was like, I'll take everything that you can fit in the car. And I loaded the car up. Drove home because I was working with my brother at the time. And I walked into the office with these things and he's like, oh, fuck, what have you done now? Because I was known for this. And I was like, these are going to be amazing. These are going to be the next big thing for sure. These are cool. Look at them. They're amazing. You know, they're only 120 quid type thing. And I remember kind of like making a few phone calls to some good dealers that I had with our mates of mine. And I was like, I've got these scooters. They're going to be amazing. You got to get on board. They were like, what? Are you mental? And I was like, no, honestly, look, these guys have got a huge PR campaign behind it. They're going to be everywhere. And they were the same guys that were like, I need 200 by the weekend and here's my credit card number. You know, it was phenomenal. And did really well in a year. Went from kind of zero to hero. And then you get lots of copies coming in from China, lots of kind of like, it's an arms race basically to get the cheapest quality, not quality, the cheapest price, worst quality product that you can get on the market. And it's flooded by all the big guys. It boomed and busted. There were a couple of relatively significant injuries because they were everywhere. And in the early 2000s, which is when we were doing electric scooters back then. This is how long they've been around. It's not a new thing, electric scooters. I was kind of like, I don't like the way this is going. Let's just push everything out. And in 2001, we stepped out of the market and it just exploded like badly in on itself. And went all over the shop, went really, really low quality, really cheap. Toys, basically. You could see them on the market for a tenner. It was a disaster, really. But another lesson on how quick manufacturing can accelerate in the Far East, particularly when they want to, and trying to keep anything and trying to protect anything it's impossible, really.
It's like social media trends now, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, whatever someone pushes out who's like high profile, you know, they push something out, and all of a sudden, you know, 5 hours later, everywhere sold out of whatever product it is that they're pushing.
Totally. And in those days, it was the same, but it would be over a few days, not hours. Now it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And now we kind of plan, because the speed at which you can communicate to a much wider audience now is so much quicker, instant almost. You don't have the whole kind of like, you know, 3 months in advance we're planning what magazine article we're going to write or do, or content we're going to generate, and images we're going to take photos of. And then it goes into the magazine, but it's still a month before it even hits the distribution, you know. And so now we're so much more reactive, and everything is instant. And not only is it instant to get there, it's instantly gone. You know, once it's dropped off your feed, no one's interested anymore. It's continual now. Whereas in the old days, you'd actually have a plan and you'd have a launch date and you would be able to stick to it. Now everything is leaked, and, you know, somebody that you've spoken to has put it on social media and you're like, thanks for that. We have to sign NDAs now with like Rocky and stuff. So we, you know, like if I were to talk to you about some of the new technology, because the production time to get them made is still long, but everyone hears about it instantly. You've got to kind of keep that as quiet as you can for as long as you can. So it's different. It's definitely different now, for sure.
So you got out of the market when it exploded. So what did you move into then? If scooters kind of like fell down?
Yeah, we actually shut the business because the brand that we were doing, they went through a remanagement in Holland, and the UK market wasn't very significant for them then at that point, and they kind of changed the terms. It's all a bit kind of boring and complicated, but anyway, the gist of it is that we got out of that business completely, and then I actually went and worked for a few people, and initially worked for the guys that we were buying the scooters off, so I was close to seeing it collapse. And we worked, I worked for the guys at Buff. Do you remember the headscarf?
Yes.
The neck scarf.
Still going now, aren't they?
Yeah. Really good product. So we did a bit of time for them, which was really, really, really good fun. We had those guys were mental. And that was great. So yeah, had a good time doing that. Did some PR work for somebody, up country. And that kind of, from that guy, that led into an opportunity to go to America. We were selling a couple of products over there. And this was do you remember those little pit bikes?
Yes.
My
friend's got one.
Yeah. So that was a Honda basically started that. And then there were a bunch of kind of like pit bike copies or 10-inch wheel motocross bikes. And we got involved with a brand called Thumpster back then, and sold that to a distribution company in America, which that was right early doors. Again, another opportunity going down the road. So I've jumped on, and then you get in it and then you start driving it. So that's what happens when the brake goes down the road. So you don't just sit on the back like a sprinter. You would then do some work in order to make it better or to get further down the road, type thing, to use the same analogy. And for me, it was good because I didn't have regular hours then. And I'd always been keen on snowboarding. This is a bit of a tangent. And I wanted to be better at snowboarding. And a friend of mine was a Basie ski instructor. And I said to him, I want to kind of get better at snowboarding. He's like, well, you can get lessons, or you can get lessons to be a teacher. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I might do that, because I'd done a bit of coaching at this stage. And I was like, yeah, I reckon I'd do that. How the hell do you do that? And he's like, well, you contact Basie and you enroll on one of their courses, pay a ton of money. So I did that, and went to Andorra and did over 2 years. It was 2 courses over 2 years, along with a load of hours that you need to log up teaching. And I went there thinking I was pretty good at snowboarding, and they tore you to shreds. I mean, they were good. I was not. even though I could get down a mountain. It wasn't free, but I could get down. Anyway, they tear you to shreds and teach you how to snowboard properly. And it's actually a very technical discipline. And so I learned how to do that properly, and I was better at teaching it than doing it. Actually, I was a good snowboarder. You have to be a good snowboarder in order, otherwise they won't give you the lessons, or they won't give you the badge, essentially. So I passed all of those courses, which was cool, and I think probably still one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's properly intensive, and it's real teaching, like proper lesson planning and all that kind of stuff. So learn all of that. But on the same time that I was doing that, I was selling product basically for a commission to these guys in the States. And I was having a roll of a time, really, because I was doing what I love doing. I was teaching at Plymouth ski, the dry ski slope down there, doing a bit of that to keep my hours up, and was loving it. And when you're a member of Basie, you get a magazine. There's like four a year. And I remember in November, start of the season, not in November, in April, at the end of the season, I got the magazine, and in the back of the magazine were jobs being advertised for the following season. And so completely on a whim, there was a job advertised for Mount Snow in Vermont in America. And I'd kind of always dreamed about doing a ski season, but thought that I was in my early 30s, got 2 young kids. But anyway, shits and giggles, phoned the guy up, interested in the job, as a snowboard instructor, because I'd just got my license like that spring. And he said, yeah, come and have an interview. So I went to London, didn't tell Luce at all about this, completely stealthy. Yeah, I'm just going to London for a meeting, and went up, got interviewed by like a super young bloke in his early 20s. And I was like, I'm sort of a bit older than you. This is a bit weird. And anyway, aced the interview, and he said, yeah, okay. Right, well, we'll give you the job. And I was like, this is too easy. Like, you must be giving it to everybody. And he's like, no, you are exactly what we want, because we get loads of 18-year-old lifties that come in and Aussies that come in, 18, 19, they just want to go snowboarding and they want someone else to pay it. He said, I reckon that you'll actually show up for work because you're more experienced, a little bit more mature. You've done really well in your kind of assessments and everything. And I was like, feeling pretty good about myself. So I was driving home thinking, I fucking ace this. This is amazing. I'm going snowboarding. And then I was thinking, this little kind of niggling thing in the back of my head was like, you should probably tell your wife. And so I was driving home, planning like the 4-hour journey home, how I could kind of break it to her, because I couldn't just come out with it. I needed to try and make it look like it was her idea. And she does know this, so it's not talking out of school so much. And it was a few weeks, but it kind of like came up in conversation about maybe doing a ski season. And she was like, oh yeah, maybe, yeah, I don't really know. I don't want to go to the Alps or anything. I don't really like the French, and I don't want to learn a language, and the kids are young and blah, blah. And I was like, what about, just on the off chance, what about somewhere like, maybe like America or something? She was like, oh yeah, America sounds like it could be pretty cool. And I was like, great, I've got a job and we leave in November. She was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, seriously, I've been offered a job and I've accepted, and we leave in November. And she was like, you fucking idiot. And we did. We like rented a house over there, and I did it, and it was cool. It was really cool. And I taught kids to snowboard. It was amazing. Shit money, like super crappy money. But really rewarding, because their PE lessons, like, so the school kids they would come on the slope, and instead of going and doing football, they would come skiing. So you'd pick up these kids at the beginning of the season. You'd have them all season, and you'd have like almost every afternoon, you'd get a different class, and they would be your class for the year. And they would go from not being able to put bindings on to, right, follow me through the park. We would hit the half pipe and we'd go snowboarding through trees, and they were just awesome. And Luce, bless her, we had a 1.5 and a 3-year-old, a 1.5 and a 3.5-year-old in the snow, pre-challenging. And I would be snowboarding all day, like living the dream. And at the end of the day, I would get the last lift up, because you obviously get to know all the lifties. And then I would snowboard home back to my house through these trees and down all these snowmobile tracks and through people's gardens. And it was just freaking awesome. And I would get to the house and I'd already hear the kids crying. And I'd be like, right, I need to say that I've had a shit day. I can't go on about how good it was. And so I would get through the door, go through, hang my snowboard up, take my boots off, and Lucy would be like, "You be all right?" Kids would be crying. I'd be like, "Yeah, just a kind of sort of all right day. Didn't really get much work, it was sort of okay." Thinking, "This is the most amazing thing ever." And she'd be like, I'd go, "How was your day?" And she went, "Oh, I went to Wilmington to the library. Yeah, the car broke down, and we get in a blizzard, and we did this and we did that, and I've been to the laundrette." And I'm like thinking, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." But in all of this, I was still flogging motorbikes to this company in the States, and they were based in Miami. And there was a big trade show in February, and they offered me a job to go and help them increase the distribution across the States for these motorbikes. And I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds cool. We don't need to go back to the UK. Our house is rented, so we'll just extend it. So we moved from Vermont to Miami, and I got like a real job, 14-hour day, 2-hour commute in an office, pasty. And she spent the whole day on the beach, like total role reversal, basically. And I would come home and it would be dark and I'd be knackered, and she'd still be in like a bikini, and her hair would all be like blonde, kissed by the sun and salty, and the boys would be in their nappies running around. They were brown, and I'd come in through the door knackered, and I'd look at them and I'd be like, "Good day?" And she'd be like, "Oh, we just met these wonderful people on the beach. We're going to do this. We're going to go, oh, it's just so amazing. It's like wonderful." And I'm like, bitch, but it's only really payback for what, I had up in Vermont. But anyway, it was all good. And so that was kind of like, oh, blimey, where would that be? Early 2006, 2007. So what are we, like 15 years ago?
Yeah.
13 years ago or so.
Yeah, 15 years ago.
Yeah. We stayed there for 2 years in total, most of the time down in Miami. And I traveled the entire States. We had 25 agents working for us. Had a really successful time there. I mean, it was only working for the guys, but we did really well. And again, that kind of one of those markets that sort of came off the boil, lots of competition, less expensive, unbranded stuff coming in. And, we were kind of coming home anyway. Some kind of boring complications at work, sort of deals changing and not really being as good as it was. And I was like, I think I'm out of this. And we did a big road trip from Miami to Seattle because I had a really good friend that lived up in Seattle. So I basically drove and camped, and took us 4 weeks to drive across and to us show the boys and Luce the bits of America, because they'd really only been stuck in Miami. So that was really cool. Big country. Big, and super diverse. It's amazing, really.
Well, each state is its own country, isn't it, pretty
completely.
much?
And so totally different. State lines are like borders, really. And east to west, I mean, completely different. Obviously they've had some issues recently, but it's still a pretty phenomenal place, actually. It's definitely good. But they are foreign. They may speak the same language or similar-ish language, but they're certainly foreign to us. And I think we forget that. You go there and you're like, well, it's just like home. It's like, no, it's not there. It's a foreign country for sure. But it's good. Yeah, really good time. And then Lucy's dad got ill, actually, fortunately with cancer. And so we came home. We came home then, and what happened then? We came home, I did some more training camps, so still cycling a bit. I won't bore you with that story, but there was a job being offered for a mountain bike distribution company called Silverfish, which is based down in Plymouth then, but it's in Saltash now. Applied for that job. They were looking for a general manager, and I was like, I can do this. It's pretty easy. And I wanted a job, I wanted like a regular kind of like just 9 to 5 type thing. And that was awesome. That was also really cool. Worked there for a couple of years and then set up my own thing. Learned a lot from them, and got back into the UK bike world, I guess, industry. And then randomly, full circle, got approached again by somebody building scooters. And it had developed from being kind of a form of mobile or micro mobility, they call it for the posh word, to becoming a sport. And so the kids had basically taken the product, they were starting to learn tricks, they were riding them in skate parks, and they were getting really good. And what was happening is that the product wasn't really made for that. It was made as a toy. So you can ride it to school, run off the pavement, it's fine. But the minute you start riding it in the skate park, they would just be braking left, right and centre. And so I got approached, and then I basically started distributing a couple of brands in the UK of this new kind of form of product. And what was quite good at that stage, again, another kind of like break going down the road, jump on the opportunity. I got really involved in the development of it as well. And so it kind of dragged up all of this kind of engineering stuff that I hadn't done for years, But I'd known about manufacturing because we'd been manufacturing bikes, we've been manufacturing motorcycles, and now we're manufacturing scooters, which is relatively simple because only 5 moving bits. But the kind of technicality of building something to withstand quite a lot of force, regardless of what it is I find quite interesting, a bit geeky. And so we were building kind of extrusion tools to, handle the forces that these guys were using. And the product was getting bigger and stronger, and we were essentially trying to keep up with the sport, actually, because the sport was developing much faster than the product. And then, on the back of trying to sell more scooters or promote more scooters, we were like, we need to do more events. And so me and a couple of other guys, we organized some tours. We organized some like competitions, and it was great. It just grew from there.
More along like the skateboarding sort of thing. So like what, bowls and
any type of skate park really. So bowls, half pipe, like rhythm sections. Any skate park that you can go to.
Any racing?
No, not racing. Although there are guys that do a little bit of kind of like a dual slalom type setup.
Yeah, kind of like the BMX and where you got the pump tracks.
That's it, with the pump tracks. But that's not something that's really taken off. We did a little bit of mountain boarding. That we build like a dirt scooter and we would ride that off road. And there was an element. We did a few events where guys could basically do that dual slalom on mountain board tracks, basically. And that kind of like didn't really take off, but was super good fun. It was awesome to watch. But no, it's predominantly skate parks. And I think scootering, it's a bit of a naff word really for it, because it's a bloody awesome. The guys are properly good. And it saved tons of skate parks. Like they would have gone out of business if they had to rely on BMX and skateboarding. The participation level is huge in comparison to that. And it definitely gave those guys the abilities to open up new parks, which then feeds more people doing it. And the parks that existed, they were like, yeah, we're definitely more scooter riders. And there was a big resistance against them in the beginning. It's super tribal, all those types of sports. And they were like, oh, it's just kids. And they keep dropping in on me. And they're like,
it's like SUP and surfing, isn't it?
Absolutely the same. And now bloody hydrofoiling, it's kind of like you can catch it from Bigbury and ride it over. And it's the same thing. And I used to say, look, they just need teaching. You know, you were that when you first started skateboarding. The only difference is you fell off more. They don't fall off because it's a bit easier to do. And so it's grown enormously. And you can't leave your house on any given day without seeing a kid riding a scooter now, really. How many times do you see someone riding a skateboard? Like, ever, you know? So it's definitely
40-year-old Adz riding around here on a surf skate.
Yeah. Other than that, yeah. Oh yeah, that's one of mine. Yeah. So there is a little bit of that going on. And we were, I say, not me alone, but me with a lot of help. We've driven that sport. And there's a World Championships now. We have a big kind of called Scoot Fest, which we've done for about 7 years running now. And we went virtual this year because of the COVID thing. So we did a big virtual online competition, which was really good. So yeah, you're just continually adapting that sport to grow. It's got bigger and bigger, and there's more and more opportunities now. And some of the guys who are in it, the early adopters of it, you know, they're earning a living out of the industry now, which is really cool because it has to become self-sustaining, really.
What are the scooter brands that you're pushing?
So we own 2, District and Dominator. They're our own. And then we distribute Aztec, Grit, and Crisp. So 5. Is that 5? That's 6, isn't it? Can't even count. Never great at maths. But also we've done we've got a licensed agreement with Nitro Circus to do Ryan Williams' signature products. So 7 in total. And that's probably been the biggest one recently. He's a huge star. Big following on Instagram. 4 times X Games BMX champion. I mean, he's a really good athlete. And obviously part of the Nitro Circus, which is awesome as well. So it's pretty good being involved with those guys. But as a business, we kind of knew that I'd been in this sort of scooter world before, and it can be a bit boom and bust. So not straight away, but within a couple of years of us starting, I started to utilize our customer base, and our customer base was predominantly bike. And so we looked at distributing other products to that customer base. And that was when we started doing Rocky Mountain. We're the UK distributor for Rocky Mountain bicycles as well. Which we've done now for a few years. And I'd known those guys from the Silverfish days, because they were distributing it when I worked there. They stopped distributing it, and Rocky had nowhere to go. And Randy came to me, the guy that is the international sales manager there. And he's like, do you want to do Rocky? And I was like, no, I don't want to do anything bike. It's tough business. And anyway, he worked on me for about 6 or 7 months, and then eventually we were caved, and I was like, all right, we'll do it. And it's been good, actually. It's been really good. And it's a great brand, great product.
So they distribute normal, regular mountain bikes, but also electric mountain bikes as well?
Yeah, both now. Yeah, they went a bit of a different way with the electric stuff. They were not late to the market because they were early adopters of building their own technology. And so whereas a lot of brands were kind of going down the Bosch or Yamaha or Shimano type electric motor, where the motor is the same, and the bike you build around the motor is different, Rocky were like, no, we're going to build our own motor, and then we're going to build the bike around the motor. And so you end up with the bike, which is essentially a much better riding bicycle because it doesn't have the parameter of fitting a motor into it. And so the geometry in that is almost identical, if not identical, to a normal bike. Whereas with electric bikes, normally the geometry is slightly different to compensate for the motor being in the middle of it. And so that's working quite well for them. Electric bikes are not cheap, so it's pretty Gucci, but
electric everything these days is quite popular. Cars, scooters, we're talking about their mountain bikes. It's all, it's quite a big thing. Even like you watch some of the pros in Hawaii, they're rocking around on just 100%. They're almost like electric motorbikes, aren't they? Really. Just bouncing around different breaks.
Yeah, over there, I've surfed at trestles a little bit, and there's a lot of guys going down the break because it's I don't know how far it is, but it's quite a long walk from the car park.
It's about a 25-minute walk, I think.
Yeah, all the way down to the bottom, which I've done a few times in bare feet, which is not fun. But these guys, they're riding electric bikes, so they got the like kind of small fat tires with a surfboard rack, and they'll whiz by. And you're like, that's probably quite a good idea. And it also in the beaches at France, where, it's peak after peak after peak. But most people kind of like group up around where the car park is. And then you've got these guys on these bikes that are going down across the sand dunes or right down along the beach to get a peak on their own type thing. And so it's extended your ability, it's linked back to surfing, it's kind of like these are useful products.
That's kind of what my idea has been milling around in my head for when I move up to North Devon in January, just to get away from the hordes.
I think it would work. It's very hilly up there though, and the coastal path is pretty brutal, so you'd need something a bit good for that. But otherwise, it's a long hike in it, or surfing in the dark. So
you're a distributor for Dakine as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, Dakine's an interesting one for us. So we, through work that we had done for the Nitro Circus guys, sorry, let me get this right. The guy that worked at Nitro Circus was the guy that we did the deal with. He left and went to a brand called Marquee Brands, which is a big company. And that company bought Dakine. And because we'd done a pretty good job and delivered a good product for him with Nitro Circus, he introduced us to the guy in charge of Dakine and said, you should chat to these guys because, they're reliable, which is seemingly quite difficult to be nowadays. So we ticked a load of boxes, got on really well with him, liked us, liked him, all that kind of stuff was good. So they approached me and said, we're going to buy Dakine. They hadn't yet done it at this stage. What do you think about doing some of the categories or maybe making a scooter with Dakine on it? And I was like, I don't think that's a very good idea. And they said, well, look, what do you reckon type thing? And I was like, yes, cool. I mean, it's good. What do you want me to do type thing? And they said, why don't you just write down a list of things that you think would be suitable for the Dakine brand? And we'll have a chat. And that was really what started it. And I went with a list of stuff, like electric bikes for surfing, exactly that. That kind of beach bike, if you like. Helmet for cycling, because they don't do a helmet. Eyewear. And a few other bits and pieces, extension of their protection range, a few bits, things that they're not already doing that they should be doing, that are natural fits. And the most obvious one for me was wetsuit. And I said to them, in that list of things was wetsuit. And they said, okay, well, if you wanted to do one, if you had to pick one, which one would you want to do? And I was like, to be honest, with the guys I know, I'd do wetsuit because I think we can build a really good wetsuit for you guys. And that was how it came about. And they were like, yep, let's do it. And so they then bought Dakine, nothing to do with me. They bought Dakine because it was a good deal. And it was a good brand, and their plans to grow it, is really interesting. And I think it's certainly got legs, and we just focused on doing a wetsuit for them. And so we're kind of like one of their new additional categories. They've gone into footwear as well, and I think it's going to be really good. We've been, this is our third year now, and we haven't yet we've just got a product to market because of COVID. Unfortunately, that was a bit of a massive spanner in the works, because we'd planned to launch back in the spring last year. But we couldn't do any pre-sales because the world had shut down in March. It was right bang in the middle of our pre-sale. And so we had no option but to kind of axe the plan or delay it, which we did basically. And so now it's this spring when it will hit the market. So 2021 April 2021 is when we'll have product in the market. But we've seeded it a little bit with a few bits and pieces. We've been developing it for a couple of years, testing it with people, getting their feedback. We are our biggest critics of it. Forget what the brand is. We want to make the best suit that we can with the tools that are available. So I'm, every single time I use one, I'm like, oh, I think I felt a bit of water there. How can we stop that doing? Like really, really critical of them. And then I talk to guys that use them and they're like, freaking hell, the suits are amazing. They're super warm. They're really flexible. They dry quickly, all the things that they should do. And so it's, I know that we've got something that's pretty good. I also know that there's things that we can do to it to make it better, and we will be, but they're not quick changes. There's a life cycle that you kind of got to go through, a production cycle. But yeah, it's good. And actually, probably in hindsight, not launching last autumn has enabled us to come to the market with a better product than we had then. And so that's been pretty good, actually, or will be, hopefully. And the pre-sales have been strong, and it's global. So it's bloody scary, actually.
Thinking about it on like that kind of scale, being a distributor, but also helping with the manufacturing of something that, what we were talking about before we started the podcast, a surfing community, but a global one.
Yes.
Putting the product out there that is not necessarily swamped with different brands and wetsuits and stuff, but people have their own takes on them, whether it's, the Patagonia suits that have got the lining inside, or, you've got other distributors that have got, half lining, half different types of neoprene. And yeah,
it's actually, I think probably I just took it for granted. But like most people do, it's just a wetsuit, right? It's got a job to do, so you don't even think about it, and you abuse the shit out of it. I mean, it's one of the hardest used products probably that we are as surfers, way more than the board probably, other than maybe wax, which whatever. But so I was, when we started looking at the developing of it, engaged with Phil up in North Devon, who's been building wetsuits for years and designing wetsuits for years. We were kind of like, right, how can we come to the market with something that's different in a way? I mean, it will be different in a way because it's branded differently. And half of the market, when we did our research, half of the market kind of like already thought that Dakine did a wetsuit, and the other half were like, you should do a wetsuit. It's the most obvious thing you should do. It's a surf brand after all. So we were pretty confident that when we built one, it would sell, even if it wasn't very good type thing, because it's got a really strong brand. And when people would say to me, oh, you don't want to come super crowded, there's loads of wetsuits, the world doesn't need another wetsuit, whatever. I get that. But there's also there are guys who will only ever buy an O'Neill wetsuit because they've had it for years. They're super happy with it. And it's a great product. They're all great products. Nowadays, there are no bad wetsuits, really. There are just different wetsuits.
There's too much market research out there, isn't there?
Yeah, it just comes down to your personal preference, or who that's got one, or where you can get a deal. That's predominantly, and it's a really frustrating thing for us because we came to the market, and our the Dakine DNA, if you like, is to build trusted, durable product. There are guys that have got a backpack that they've had for 20 years, right? And that's Dakine's DNA. That's when you build anything for Dakine, that's where you have to start. And so when we were looking at a wetsuit, most of the wetsuits nowadays, they're great products, but they don't last that long. And they're not particularly clean products environmentally. And so we kind of looked at it from the ground up. And because we haven't been building wetsuits for 30 years, we can look at it with fresh eyes and come, right, if we were to start building a wetsuit today, if Billabong was starting to build a wetsuit today with no history, what would you do? And so we looked at it, we came at it from that approach. And so and there's a kind of element between, there's a trade-off between flexibility, durability, sustainability. There's lots of abilities, no ability, that's all a big trade-off. That's all a big compromise. And you can build the best performing, super comfy, super flexy wetsuit, and it might last 3 months. Or you can build one that will last forever, but it'll be awful to use. So it's really challenging to try and build something that will tick all of those boxes enough to get consumer adoption. Because you can, like with Patagonia, they build a great wetsuit. They use a natural source product with Ulex. Their linings are pretty good. But Ulex as a foam isn't quite as good as limestone-based foam. It's way cleaner. Arguably better or worse, not sure for the environment, but it's a better product, as in from a sustainability perspective. But if you talk to anyone that uses a Patagonia wetsuit, it may not be the best one to use. It may not be the most comfy. It's possibly a little bit stiffer. And that's the trade-off, right? Do great for the environment. It will still work perfectly like a wetsuit. It's still super warm and you can still move in it. It's not like you're being tied up or anything. But it may not be as flexible as rip curls, for instance. And so when we're looking at building wetsuits, we're taking all of this from what other people are doing and what we're doing, and we're trying to kind of push it all into this big moldable ball to get the best outcome. And it is a trade-off. And that's why there are different levels of wetsuit. So we have 3 levels, without getting too much into a production marketing thing. We have 3 levels, and each one of those 3 levels do a different thing. And depending on what you want out of the suit, there's one that will kind of fit your bill. And if you want one which is more durable to last a lot longer, or that's repairable, we've got a wetsuit for you. If you want one that's going to perform slightly better, but maybe not as environmentally friendly, we've got that one for you. Or if you want just a properly good, robust, do everything kind of suit, but not spend as much money on it, then we've got that too. And most brands have got all of those things. And like I say, there aren't really any bad wetsuits out there. And it's good, we'll probably sell a few.
Which moves in nicely to sustainability, which is one of the things you wanted to talk about. Yeah,
sustainability is, I think as surfers and mountain bikers, and being people that live outdoors a lot, sustainability is a really difficult thing to get right. And you can have the most sustainable product on the planet and no one will buy it. And that's a bit challenging for us as manufacturers, for all brands, is to build eco-conscious, sustainable products, and consumers adopt it. Because without mass adoption, like I say, it doesn't matter what you do. Are electric cars cleaner than petrol cars? Yes. There's still way more petrol cars sold, so, and it's changing and it's a slow process. And, we strive to build the most kind of product that will leave the smallest trace and do the least harm. But it is a bit of a challenge, and it needs people to adopt it.
I think one of the hardest things when you're talking about sustainability, and especially when you reflect on the environment as well, is that it's really difficult to get people out of their normal way of life and their normal way of thinking. Everybody's pro something, whether it's, but let's be honest, social media drives people's thinking these days.
It can do, yeah, for sure.
And when I mean that with, what we're talking about here, the environment, sustainability, using products, creating products that aren't going to hurt the environment when either they're broken, they've been used or whatever, is that you need to change people's thought process, saying that this is better for the environment, but not take the easy option, saying, look, we're promoting this, right? This is the best product. Let's say it's a shirt, because I'm looking at your shirt now. Let's use your shirt, for example. Yeah. This shirt is eco-friendly. Once you've finished with it, it's ripped, whatever, it's biodegradable, it's gone. But then the price cap on that, because it is a sustainable item, is a lot higher than, let's say, you go onto eBay and you buy a shirt for 10 quid that looks exactly the same, but your price cap is 30, 40 quid over what you want to buy. So what you've got to try and change is that you're buying something for life. Now, my missus will hate me saying this because I've only got 3 or 4 T-shirts and jumpers and jeans and stuff, and I wear the same shit all the time.
I know, I do as well. Totally the same.
That's kind of what we're talking about.
It is, yeah.
But the social media and the industry, the fashion industry as a whole, is very driven, and you almost kind of playing on people's wealth a little bit, aren't you?
Yeah, I do.
Do you see that or no?
No, we see it all the time because you have to look at the reason why somebody buys something in the first instance. And my feeling is basically buy less shit with money that you don't have to impress people that you don't like.
Exactly.
Right? So if we all did that, actually, we'd probably have a fairly clean environment, and we could go and buy occasionally the things that we do want just for our own sake type thing. And, you know, clearly the most sustainable products are the ones that last forever, never get thrown away. But it's the process from sourcing raw materials to then molding and building and producing those raw materials into a finished product that's also as sustainable and as environmentally friendly as possible, shipping that product to somewhere where people can access it, it's, you know, in as green way as you can, and then making that product last for as long as possible. That's like a big, long process. That's even before you've got to what the price of it is. You know, using ethically sourced labor, you know, that's more expensive. Sourcing organic produced cotton, that's more expensive. Recycling bottles, that's expensive to do that, and actually takes a lot of energy to do that. It might be better off just to build the yarn from scratch in the first place. So there's all these sort of like loads of different factors, but then ultimately you get to the point where someone has to buy it, so they need to find it. That's normally from some article on social media probably that they've seen, or through like, you're wearing a nice fluffy jumper, I'm like, nice jumper ads, where do I get one of those type things? So you're being influenced by somebody. But then frustratingly, and we all do it, me included, oh, can you do a deal? Can you do us a deal on one of those things? And you're like, no, I fucking can't do you a deal, because like I can't get to where it is here, and then not make any money on it in order to reinvest in making it cleaner in the future. And I do exactly the same. Like, I would probably never buy one of our mountain bikes at full retail. And it's crazy for me to say that, but that's it. But we need to, you know, everybody needs to buy. There's a reason why things are the price they are. And that's because, you know, it's sustaining people's livelihoods. There's loads of people in the supply chain that's got to eat. You know, it's like these things are expensive. I mean, I'm amazed we pay what we pay for some stuff. When I think about one wetsuit or one bicycle or one scooter even, which is hardly any moving parts, the process from the drawing that you're paying somebody to do or needs to make a living on because he's a designer, a product designer, from that point to getting it in a box on a shop floor, that's quite a long process. What we actually end up paying for that product is way too cheap when you consider everything that it's gone through. Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit frustrating. So how do we make super sustainable, equally sourced, ethically sourced, all the other bits and pieces, fair trade, all the other junk, and do it at a price that people are considered for being the right price to pay for it? And what is that right price? And is everyone happy to do it? You know, that kind of old adage, what is it? Buy cheap, buy twice, or something, that saying. Well, that's sustainability, yeah. Buy once. That's it. Done. Got the thing forever. And that's why, you know, when people like Patagonia and stuff and other brands, not just them, they'll do this kind of like free repair service, because like throwing it away, that's really harmful, because even if it biodegrades, and we're working on biodegradable product right now for the future, it's still got to go into the correct landfill. It's still got to be, but it's not like it's disappeared. It's still a long process for it to disappear into, back into the earth. Although that is compostable stuff. It's amazing what you can compost actually with the right additives.
Or not burn it.
Yeah. Like, definitely don't burn it. That's not necessarily a good idea. The correct landfill is probably still the best way. You can create gas, which can be used for fuel. There's loads of byproducts that you can use from it. And essentially it's turning back to, our ultimate gain or plan is to be able to take something out of the environment that's been used. So let's say a plastic bottle, build it into a product that we can use, and then we throw it away, it biodegrades. That's where we're striving to, and we're close. We've done it in a lab. We can do it. But we then need to make it so that someone will be able to pay for it. And it not be to the detriment of performance. It needs to perform exactly the same as its non-ethically sourced counterpart. And it needs to cost about the same. And those are the challenges.
That's good to see that, you're making a product for Dakine that, is all your other brands as well, your scooter brands as well, that is going to be more focused towards that as well.
Yeah, we try not to throw anything. If you get like in the trade, if you get a box from us, it'll be a box that we've had delivered to us that we've reused. Just simple things like that we hardly throw away any cardboard now. We reuse it. And you could say, it just moves it down the line. Arguably, yeah, but it's also taken a new box out of the environment, So use it more, use it for longer, throw it away less, repair it if you can. And spend the appropriate amount of money in the first place to get you that. And I think what you were saying earlier, we need to change our habits from a health perspective and an environmental perspective as well. We're not healthy people.
It's one of the most difficult things to do is change people's ways. Again, that's something for an individual, I think, not necessarily for, I don't know, definitely not companies or from a conglomerate point of view. You can't really tell somebody to do something because they won't do it. I think information and maybe, I'm just going to use the word influencers, people in a position of responsibility that people listen to, especially these days, is probably the only way really that's going to get across to people.
I think this Christmas COVID thing is a pretty interesting point that totally in agreement with you. You can be influenced to change, or you can be legislated to change. Those are the only two ways really that we're going to make any fundamentally big difference. Because it's unlikely that you'll wake up one day and be this kind of eco warrior unless you've been exposed to it in the first place. Half the guys probably don't even know that what they're buying is harmful, or that there is an alternative. So you can't judge them for that. They just don't know any different. And like with this Christmas thing, the government have set out a set of guidelines, not rules. I don't know why people call them Christmas rules, but they're Christmas guidelines. We don't have to abide by them. But if you get, like a load of people kind of going, oh, well, these are the rules, and are you going to break them? Well, number one, they're guidelines. But if you get enough influencers saying, well, actually, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to, we're going to actually have a Christmas on our own, which is totally fine. It's not a big deal. It can actually have a very positive effect. But it can only be those two things. Without kind of education or awareness at some level, you may not know that what you're doing is good or bad. But yeah, so for us, it's through legislation or it's through influence, pretty much. Cool. And we're influenced by our peers a lot. Yeah,
100% agree. Let's talk a little bit about surfing a little bit. So what are you riding at the moment?
Oh, I, unfortunately, then this is not an OG thing, but I've been riding a mid-length a lot. I know, God, it's such a... I'm just going to beat myself for a second while I say that out loud.
I was going to say...
riding a mid-length. I think it's Pointer's fault. That's the trouble.
What, with his M2?
Yeah, with his M2. His bastard M2.
A friend of mine's just bought a 7.2 MIDI Channel Islands.
I mean,
MIDI.
it's the shortest mid-length I can buy, if there's any justification. It's a 610. It's called a magnet. It's a brand that we do called Alone. And it's the Alone magnet. And it's actually, like yesterday, it was probably the right board. But when I'm not riding that, I flip between Meguro, Sharp Eye Meguro, which is a 20, which is super good fun, or a kind of 6.0. I've just got a new Paisalian XL, Paisalian 2 XL, which is the fat boy, nearly 50-year-old shortboard version. It's basically the same board with a bit of extra volume. So I've used that a couple of times, and that's actually quite good. I think that could be quite a good bit of a go-to board for almost all conditions, actually. That's really nice shape. I'm
loving the way talking to people, everyone's going a little bit more volume. It's amazing.
Yeah, we get super hung up on it though. I mean, like we have customers come through the door and they're like, I need a board around 34.2 litres.
Yeah.
And you're like, we've got one here at 34. No. And I'm like, it won't make that much difference. I mean, 25 litres to 35 litres, that makes a big difference. But you need to think about the shape of the board as well, what kind of conditions that you're going to be using it in, how fit you are, how many times you go surfing. There's so many millions of variables that you can't just be hung up on the litre. As a guide, for sure. I know for me, anywhere between 32 and 37, I'm pretty comfortable on a board.
Are you me?
Yeah, possibly.
You might be me.
I think I might be you. Well, I've got loads of board, van full of boards that are all around that size. And I tend to have the best surfs on boards around that volume. But it can be 5.8 to 6.10, depending.
Again, are you me?
Yeah.
That's what's in my garage.
Great minds.
Yeah.
Great jumpers. I think that's probably where I'm at with it. But it's taken a while. And as I say, I took a big break from surfing. And I can tell you now that you think buying a wetsuit is confusing. Holy shit, buying a surfboard. How do you choose? There's so much choice. And they all do everything really well. All these boards, all the reviews. Yeah, they pedal really well. They catch waves really cheaply. They turn on a dime. Not all boards can do that, surely.
Well, it's also the standard of the person on it. So, like, if you're...
That's the variable.
That's not just it is the variable.
The variable, yeah.
And again, I've talked about this quite a few times, but you've got people that talk a really, really good wave,
yeah.
But can they actually do what they're talking about? In their head, they might be, but then...
Yeah.
But then also, you've also got to think about that, like you say, there are so many different types of boards out there. Is what do they want to achieve out of their surfing? Now, that's the key point. Do they think they're going to be in a year, or are they at the level of, a pro where they cracking a massive bottom turn, smashing the lip, maybe getting the fins out, doing some really hardcore rail surfing? Or they
know what they want, though.
Yeah, or are they just a little bit like me, where you like to think that you could do something like that, but realistically, you're more like doing a bottom turn, doing the cruisy top turn, and just doing a little bit of bottom to top. In my head, I am. Whether I am or not is a different matter.
I know. For me, I think it comes down to how it feels. And the feeling comes from the pressure or the force being pushed back through the board. And sometimes you can do like a really nice kind of cut back and you go, wow, that felt like there was loads of force, a little bit of spray, I'm John type thing. You're clearly not. But
and the photo hasn't been taken to say that you are.
And there is no proof of it. But that's what it felt like. And I think you should buy boards that make you feel that way. And it doesn't matter if it's a Minimal, a Foamy, or a Toothpick. Buy boards that enable you to ride as many waves as you can when you're out, and that feel the best. And it doesn't matter. No one's watching. Well, there's a few people watching, No, there's no one really watching. That's why wave pools are a bit weird, aren't they? How much anxiety do you get paddling into a wave pool?
It depends on...
I'm not sure I like them.
It depends what your personality is like, though, isn't it? Whether you get hung up on people watching you. But at the end of the day, if you go out, good day at Croyd, there's a million people out there, and it's the same amount of people there watching you do stuff as you would be at a standalone pool. It's
not as arena, though, is it? It's not like...
It's only like that if you make it like that in your head.
Totally. I know. I mean, I get in and paddle out having a word with myself.
I'm more frustrated with myself for not being able to do
the turn that you were trying to...
Certain things on it, rather than I just look like a kook in front of all them people stood in there. Couldn't give a shit about that, if I'm perfectly honest. I'm more concerned about... I just spunk something that and I'm trying to get like what?
Damn it! I'm not John.
Yeah, I'm trying to get 20 waves in the session, not just the 40 that come through in the set or whatever.
Yeah.
No,
I think it's a bit odd, but we have guys, like I say, come through the shop, and I think you just need to be honest about it. And I was actually emailing with somebody from the Caribbean randomly last night who wants to buy a board, and they're looking at a Paisel Gremlin, and they've been surfing a year, and they live in the Caribbean, so they're going to get some good surf over there, and they're like trying to come off a mini mal, and they're looking for the next board. That's an impossible task for us. I don't know who they are, how they surf, but surfing a year, what size would you go for? She's looking at, is a lady looking at a 6'8" Gremlin. Like, that's a massive surfboard. You're probably better off on your mini mal.
Yeah,
because if it's not the right size, it also won't perform very well. Because they need to fit you. Shortboards need to fit you. As importantly as what the volume is. Possibly. I'm not I know what it feels like. And I know that we did loads of video analysis when we were learning to snowboard and teaching snowboarding. And that really helps. If you can get someone to film you, because the movement that you think you're making, you could be miles off. It's like when we would do it, like we would traverse across the slope, and we would go, right, from 1 to 10, you go up and down. And then when you finished it, you tell me where you were between 1 and 10 on that movement. And you'd be 50% of what you actually were doing. You'd be like, oh yeah, I was definitely, right down to sort of 2. And they'd be like, you didn't get down as far as 7, really. And you're like, oh shit. And then all of a sudden you're connecting the feeling with the visual, and it's a way faster way of accelerating how to improve, actually. Otherwise you don't really know. You can't surf in front of a mirror.
It's a whole different podcast technique right there. Mate, we've been going for an hour and 40, so I'm going to do a little bit of a quick fire round with you. It's more surf orientated more than
fine.
Biking. Is that the right word? Biking?
Biking would be right.
Yeah, biking. As long as it's not dogging, it's all right.
Not dogging. Although, no, not a particularly good expert.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Okay, so if you could ride one surfboard fin setup for the rest of your life, would it be single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad, bonzer, or finless?
Thruster.
Favourite surfer and why?
Oh, no, John, I think. He is amazing.
He looks strong this year as well.
He's good, yeah.
Last surf film you watched?
Tokyo Rising.
It's good, that, wasn't it?
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, I watched it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, really good.
First surf film you've ever watched? Or you ever watched?
Bloody hell.
If you say the same one that I did, I'm going to go. Should we just swap lives for a little bit?
Probably not Endless Summer then.
No,
no, I don't know what the first one was. I wouldn't be able to. I'm not actually very good at remembering the names of movies, actually.
I found it the other day on YouTube, the first one. First surf, it was a VHS called What Now? Had Rob Machado. It was basically when Reservoir Dogs came out. And they were doing like some really, I think it might have been like a pre-make of like a Taylor Steele thing. So it had like a theme in it.
Right.
It was pretty cheesy.
I'd love it.
But it was funny. Had loads of Bruce Lee like snaps and stuff. So every time everyone hit the lift, every time someone went up to hit the lift,
you get that
whack. It's really cool. Okay, dream first surfing trip. So dream surf trip.
Not the first one I went, but just the dream one.
Just a dream one. What just make it?
Yeah, actually, I think my best surf trips are the ones that are local and it's the guys that make it, not necessarily. You can go on surf trips, and I've been on loads, where the surf will be super shit, but the trip will be amazing. And that doesn't matter, that could be anywhere. But Mentawai's probably, we were supposed to go this year, not been, so I've not been yet, so that could be a dream, could be a nightmare, don't know.
That's a tick list right there, isn't it?
See how we get on.
Dan Maker, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share and subscribe on your podcast provider, and also leave a comment. Also, you can follow the Grumpy Surfer on Instagram. Thanks for listening.